salespeople, like parents, like employees, we get confused and we bounce between those two paths, those two lanes. I show up wanting to be a good person. And then when the person gives me a little bit of pushback, I'm like, I've got to start telling why they should do it. When I see them resist, I now go back to asking questions, but it's not happening fast enough, so I become forceful and manipulative again. Mm-hmm. And I bounce between those personas. I am viewed as salesy, as pushy, as manipulative, and I feel gross. That's when sales feels gross. So what you have to do is pick the lane, earn the mantle of leadership by pursuing a shared goal and walking that person down a shared path to change. And if you do that consistently all the time, you'll never feel gross, you'll never appear salesy. And even if the successful buying decision isn't buying from you, you'll create a relationship that will drive the growth of your business, because that person, next time they need something, they will call you first.
It's funny you say that. There was a guy, he listens to the podcast, his name is Jim Vance. He's a wonderful human being. He probably helped me for 6 years before I bought from him. Me, I don't like being sold by the cliche, like, hey, Paul, how are you? How's your family? Just fucking tell me what you're going to tell me.
We know you don't care.
Yeah, it's just like, come on. Jim would always help me on deals. Like if I was doing a real estate, like, hey, Jim, I'm looking at financing this. What do you think? He's like, hey, we can do this, blah, blah. Let me run this through the bank. Let me call the bank here real quick. That always resonated with me. But I've also seen in sales, some people just need to be told, like, listen, you're trying to accomplish this. This does this for you.
Perfect.
Like, perfect what?
That is the difference between being an order taker or giving away your knowledge. So think of the principle of servant leadership, right? We serve. Now, if we're 100% service oriented, we give everything away. Why should I ever buy from you? You're just going to give me all the answers anyway.
Well, we've found, what we've been doing research is people do the best when they do that. When they give almost everything away, but then like you're talking here. Is there anything you'd say to me like, hey, I can't discuss that because it's proprietary? Or you'd be like, listen, I'm going to discuss it. They still need your help though.
Right.
They still need you to walk them through it.
Right. But so servant leadership. So if you're pure service, you are a slave, because what you're doing is your existence is defined by the person you're serving. There's none of you in that experience. You're just giving, giving, giving. Servant leadership is I'm going to give, but I'm also going to lead you down the path of change. So I'm going to work with someone who has a shared goal. If your goal and my goal is to double the size of your business, then what I can do is I can share the insights required to double the size of your business, but I can also walk you down the path to change, walk you down the path that I have mastery over to get you to the doubling of your business. Now, if you say to me, James, I'm not really sure, I can exert some force by not taking you down the path that I want you to go, but by saying, remember, you said your goal was to double the size of your business. If you go down this path, how much more likely are you to get there than if you go down this path? I can pull you back to the path, the right path, by displaying my leadership, but I'm not doing it for my benefit alone. I'm doing it for you. And so I've earned the right now to course correct you, because I'm now showing you how to get to where you want to be, not manipulating you to try my stuff.
Give me an example of how you would manipulate somebody back in the day.
Well, we have you guys ever, anybody watching or anybody here ever take advantage of a free trip to go sit for 3 hours when you listen to a...
Speaking of, remember I called Andrew cheap before? Andrew seeks those out so he can go get a free trip somewhere.
Right.
And he just sits there and goes, no.
And you, right.
No.
But and so we're talking about sitting down and listening to a pitch to buy a timeshare, right? And so the classic timeshare manipulation is how many vacations do you go on a year? How much does it cost to go on vacation? How much do you spend? Don't you think it'd be better to spend that money and build assets or equity in something, right? And so when you're sitting there, you're being asked those questions to build a case to sell you something. That person is, they only have an interest in selling. They have no interest in helping you get what you want, what you really want in life.
But if they're solving a problem, potentially, isn't that also giving somebody what they want?
If they're solving a problem, so what problem are they solving?
Well, you're right. It could very well not be a problem. Somebody could be like, I'm fine spending that. You're right. It could be, hey, does it bother you? Maybe that's the question. Does it bother you that you just pay that money towards vacation? You never, apart from the experience, you don't get anything out of it? Somebody said, no, it doesn't bother me. There's no problem. If the problem is, actually, that does kind of bother me. Like, okay, well, here's an opportunity to own something that you can build equity in and still vacation.
Right. I think the challenge, the timeshare issue is a great one because whether or not that is a problem can be debated, right?
Of course.
So there may or may not be a problem, but the question is your solution a solution that's really good for someone? So for example, I could probably identify a problem for you where you have a challenge relaxing. So if I sold heroin, I could probably convince you that heroin will help you relax.
Are you talking about Paul specifically right now or just in general?
Well, the reason I bring up heroin is it was legal at one point, right?
Yeah.
In the early 1900s, it was in cough medicine everywhere else. And when it came out and it was illegal, then the organized crime, picked it up and ran with it. If you've watched The Godfather, there's reference to that in The Godfather. So the point is, I'm going to manipulate you by selling you something that isn't good for you ultimately.
And the way you got them in was saying,
identifying a problem, yes.
Well, but I get what you're saying. I mean, because I look at it going, that's the line that I sit there and hear and I go, well, I don't know if this is, are we really, it's hard for me to sit there and differentiate sometimes like how much of the selling is, if it's problem solved. I get what you're saying. I mean, the heroin example is a good example in the sense of going to one extreme saying, listen, I could relax you by selling you pot. I mean, even though I'm all about legalization of drugs, it doesn't matter. Is that really the right solution? I don't know.
Right.
I mean, but at the same point, where do we draw that line? Is it a gray area? Is it a black and white? Is it a black and white line meeting?
It's really simple. So my responsibility as a servant leader or as a growth multiplier is to help you make a successful buying decision. Period. What is a successful buying decision? That's defined by the buyer. It's defined by how you define value. So I have to ask you, do you have a hard time relaxing? Yes. Do you also value health? Well, of course, that's why I want to relax. Well, if you value your health, then that really eliminates heroin as an option. I have a responsibility now to guide you toward the things that are going to give you the things that you value.
All right, so take the timeshare example, because heroin's obvious. Like, okay, give me the timeshare example where you feel like a timeshare would be. What's the question you go down that you sit there and say, if they answer this way, you sit there and say, okay, the timeshare is the right option for you.
Well, so one of the challenges with timeshare is that you get locked into a contract where you spend some money down, so you maybe pay 15 or 30 grand to buy 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom condo, and then you're locked into a maintenance fee.
Yeah.
So I would always ask somebody, look, 10 years after this, or 5 years after you and I do this, if you run into financial hardship or your income decreases by half, are you going to still be able to find a way to make that payment? Right? I'm going to recognize the fact that there's a huge secondary market for timeshares that can't get unloaded, right? And why do people want to unload them? Because that $600 a month fee, well, it makes sense today because I usually spend 20 grand on vacations today. It doesn't make sense in 5 years. Are you going to be okay with that? So I'm going to make sure if I'm a servant leader, if I'm out for a successful buying decision, I'm going to test you and make sure that you're aware of the consequences of that decision and make sure that it lines up with where you are today and where you want to be in the future.
Well, what about, how can that be applied for anything, including buying a house during a hot market or even buying another car? Like, let's say somebody's making good money. So you couldn't sell a car. Would you not feel right selling a car to somebody who maybe, let's say they make 300 grand a year, but they want a Bentley that the lease is $3,500 a month.
Right. Yeah. So there's
at what point does your personal, you sit there and say, I can't push my personal stuff on somebody. If somebody's like, listen, I just want to have the Bentley.
Someone's going to look at, there's all these rules out there, right? If I don't take your money, someone else will.
Well, yeah.
Let them do it.
I don't believe in that, but I get what you're saying.
So you as a human being have to identify what you stand for and what you don't stand for. And that's the principle. One of the core principles I live by is also just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Of course.
Now that's true for manipulating somebody, taking advantage of somebody. I would never have been one of those mortgage brokers that sold a $300,000 mortgage to somebody that makes 30 grand a year, right? I never would have done that. Just like I'm not going to eat food because some advertisement tells me to, just because I can eat it. I was talking to my wife about this today. As a human, as a race, think about what we eat. We eat stuff that tastes good that doesn't kill us. That's our core. Somebody dug fungus out of the ground. They ate it. It didn't kill them. And they said, wow, this makes a great sauce. Let's eat this. We have no concept of whether or not it's healthy or not. So what's interesting is as my wife and I go through our diet and explore what's healthful and what's not, our diet is shrinking from here. The foods that we can eat are shrinking from here to here. And you could either look at that as a loss or you could look at that as the consequence of wisdom. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So it's the same thing in life. You got to define what you stand for. And so kindness, right? So here's a great lesson for a salesperson. Have you ever told someone we're probably not the right solution for you? I want to put myself in a position to say that to somebody.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Now, there are many salespeople who love that line because it's the ultimate manipulative line. Because the more you say to somebody, no, you can't have it, the more they want it.
That's true.
So again, every tool can be used for good and for evil. Granted, our wins methodology can be used for good or for evil. But the point is that we develop people who have this heightened sense of awareness of who we are, what our role is in the world, and how you want to walk that path, that short time that you have on earth, and the kind of example you want to set. And what's really cool is the example I set for myself today is the exact example I want my kids to understand and live by. There's no dichotomy, there's no duality in my world, which means I have no stress, which means I'm healthier, happier, etc. And I am blessed to share that awareness with others. I can actually build up the people around me versus tear them down or just take from somebody just because I can. And what's really cool is I meet fewer people who try to take advantage of me.
Well, because you put that off, it's going to be, you put that out there, it's going to be reciprocated, right? So, no, I mean, I just always think to myself, I used to work in the car business. My only job out of college was the car business. I worked in finance, F&I, and we sold insurance and we sold warranties, right? I remember getting in an argument with not my boss, who I'm still great friends with, the guy between us who I think is a tool, because he would use this line of, if somebody said no to the warranty, he'd come in and say, the warranty company gave us 10 spots a month we can give a discount for. I'm like, but they didn't. He's like, that's not the point. I'm like, but he didn't. And I'm not saying that to pat myself in the back by any means, but it's funny. I always believed in gap insurance a ton. And that's why I sold so much gap insurance, because I believed in it a ton. Gap insurance means if you buy a car, you get in a car accident, your car's worth 10, but you owe 20, gap insurance covered the difference. I always believed in that because I was like, listen, if somebody gets in a car accident, that would suck if they owed 20 and the car was worth 10. So I see that and going like, I'm that guy who I believe I wouldn't sell anything that I didn't believe in. But I also feel like I don't want to push. It's like our houses in Mexico. We have beautiful houses in Mexico. The problem is our neighbors undercut everyone. Like they'll sit there and, so what I sit there and say is, listen, they're going to undercut everybody. That's fine. But we got to then realize what can we give our clients that's going to justify that big price? Where I can look at somebody and say, oh, you want a $4,000 vacation? That's not us. Our apartments, I always talk about that. But I do think to myself, there are times when I go, I just want to tell this person we're out for them because they're going to sit there and say they want us, right? But with those things, for some reason on those ones, I'm like, no, I just don't want the cheap person because I don't want to have to deal with their, the food wasn't, it was the complaints of things like that. You know what I mean? So I always sit there and balance, like, I usually try to give we're not the right person for you for the hothead, for the egomaniac, because that's the person I go, I just want to throw it in their face. I don't want them. You know what I mean? By the way, I'm not a salesperson by any means, but at the same token, I have seen that situation where I've had to talk to people where I think they're arrogant and just go, you know what? We're not even the right fit for you, but it's my way of saying, go like that. That's why I asked you your age, because I'm 38 and I'm on this path that you probably much further along in, where I still battle that ego of mine going, yeah, I just want to tell that person to go F themselves, and that's how I'm going to do it, kind of thing, as opposed to just sitting there saying, hey, that's cool. That's the way you want to view the world that way. As opposed to me now just going, oh, well, that's because you're an idiot. And I'm going to tell you you're an idiot by telling you, we're not the right fit for you anyhow. We know, kind of thing. You're laughing, but in my head, I'm happy that I'm at least self-aware of the fact that I'm sitting there fighting this person going, yeah, this person just has a big ego. I just need to punch him in the face somehow. How do I do that? Like, we're not the right fit for you. You're an idiot kind of thing. I don't say you're an idiot, but I remember being back in the day just going like, there was a certain part of me that goes, I don't like saying that because it's not true, as opposed to, like, even now when we make a mistake on something, like our salesperson will say something, I'm like, well, we got to honor that, even though that wasn't what we said. And I look at that saying, I'm happy I do that. But then I sit there and go way overboard and go, we got to make sure this does not happen again, because I don't want to keep writing this check over and over because we made a mistake. A lot of companies will sit there and say, well, that wasn't our, that's not what we sit there. Unless it's a big one, I'll just be like, listen, let's just honor it, whatever. How much are we going to lose on that thing? $1,000, $2,000, let's just swallow it and go on. I'm rambling in the sense of it's hard sometimes to balance that all the time about, like, if somebody just wants to spend money, if somebody just says, I know I make $300,000 a year, I know if my income dropped in half, I wouldn't be able to afford that car. I just want that car. Are you going to say no to them?
No, I think to some degree, we're adults. We're all responsible.
Correct.
For the decisions that we make. But if I'm working with somebody who's in crisis, like I had the chance to work with a company who was a storm chaser. They would follow natural disasters and they would swoop in and sell ridiculous contracts to people who were in dire straits to rebuild or repair their homes.
Is it a roofing company or just general repair?
Roofing and contracting.
Yeah.
Do I want to be in that business? I would never personally be in that business.
We have that business upstairs.
I would never be.
We really do.
Well,
but they can be helpful.
It can be helpful too. You don't have to be a crook. These guys were not ethical. So the point is, I'm not going to.
So why'd you work with them?
I didn't.
Oh.
Because they were not ethical. But I wouldn't work with there are lots of businesses I wouldn't work with. So I think we have to understand the fact that if we're being kind, that there are people that we can meet that are not prepared or in the situation where they can make a successful buying decision, and it's our responsibility. I think it's our responsibility if we really believe in the we versus the me, to let them know. Why not? What do you have to lose? That builds you up and it builds them up. It builds your market, it builds your reputation, it builds your brand, it establishes you as a credible human being. And if you have an abundant mentality, you're happy to help that person. If you have a scarcity mentality, then you're going to take every dime that you can get. But you're going to end up eventually, like I did, it's not scalable. Living a dehumanizing life is not scalable.
You talked about the banks earlier and the mortgage, being a mortgage broker. It's funny because the thing that bothered me about the whole thing, and I'm very big on let's not criticize rich people. I mean, you know me. I'm like, I hate the whole. I just saw something on LinkedIn where some guy was like, look at all these top 20 richest people in the world, and only 2 of them gave over 1% of their net worth last year to taxes. I just wrote, this is online bullying. You're basically telling somebody they don't publicly disclose. So the whole point I'm trying to make is I'm very big on wealth, and if people make the money, more power to them, and they should keep their money. The thing that bothered me about the banking thing was I believe people of their own free will can make decisions. And I think it's a little bit different. Like, even if I don't think it's my personal opinion is I don't know if it's my place to tell somebody. But at the same token, who are the people that got hurt in that situation? The banks all got bailed out, and the little guy got hurt. Both of them made stupid decisions, but one got bailed out and one didn't. As much as I'm big on corporate America, they provide jobs, that did bother me. Now, I don't play it as the victim mentality saying only poor people got affected. I'm like, no, it was a situation where I go, yeah, that's not right. These banks took advantage, did not disclose everything properly. And then when it came down to paying, I'd been fine if half the banks went under. I'd be like, great, they made a decision.
Or executives went to jail.
So
if they committed a crime.
And there is that, we do talk about that thing and, about who's responsible, who's not responsible. Jail's kind of a hard thing, but at the same point, what's the crime? I don't know. But I look at the thing saying, but these executives then got major compensation for.
They all got raises. Yeah. And bonuses.
Or just they kept their jobs. That enough is just like, well, wait a second, hang on a second. These guys all made a decision and it was the wrong decision. They paid the price. These guys all made a decision. It was the wrong decision and they got bailed out. I had a problem with that because of what you're saying. But I'm not that guy who says like, oh, it's only poor people get screwed, rich people always get better. I mean, I don't believe that. I don't think you're saying that either.
Yeah.
But everybody here who watches knows that I'm not a believer in that mentality. It's just, I believe that I'm still big on free will. And if I'm making $300,000 a year, have no savings, and want to buy a $3,000 a month Bentley, I should be allowed to do so. And I think the salesperson should feel okay saying, listen, this person is making $300,000. It's almost like, where do I draw the line saying this person should be able to understand that they make money and it could fall? Like, where is it on us to sit there and say,
yeah, and that's not it what I'm talking about.
Okay, good.
I'm certainly not a successful buying decision, right? A guy wants to buy a Bentley. I want to make sure I understand why they want to buy that Bentley and why it makes sense to make a bad financial decision.
Okay, so you're okay with somebody making a bad financial decision.
I just need to understand why it makes sense for you.
So pretend I'm the guy making $300,000 a year with no savings. I want to buy the $3,500 a month Bentley. Let's go.
Right. So we would. So this Bentley's $3,500. Tell me what kind of impact that's going to have on your lifestyle to cut that check.
Don't care.
Don't care. Okay.
I just want the Bentley. I want every hot 20-year-old to see me in that Bentley, and I want to get laid.
All right. And then you're signing a 3-year lease.
Yep.
Right. So you're going to commit yourself to 36 payments at $3,500 a month.
We only live once.
I think
God bless you.
James, this might be a real situation, actually. Everything he's now saying is very close to the truth, besides getting laid all day. But
well, the answer is God bless you. Let's go. Because
good.
You're walking into this with an open mind. You're aware of the risks. Good. Go for it. I think a person who makes $35,000 a year getting a $500,000 mortgage because somebody gives them the money, that person's not fully aware of the risks.
That's a mathematical impossibility, FYI. I mean, basically.
And that happened all the time.
I know.
Right? So that's all. So it's really just about.
Okay.
It's just about.
And I wasn't trying to go on the attack, Jimmy. I was just trying to sit there and say, like, here's where I go with we're very fortunate. Our Mexico homes, our sale is we give them to charities to go sell to other people, and we only get paid if the charities make money. So it's a very easy, warm feeling inside going, I'm not forcing anything on anybody that they aren't going to. We always tell them it costs you $0 to put in your charity, in your event. If it doesn't sell, you owe us nothing. Oh, yeah, sounds good. Let's do it. You know what I mean? What's the downside of that? If anything, it only helps them saying, wow, look at this beautiful property we have here. Instead of getting this one, even if ours doesn't sell, it might make the other ones do better. It's easy that way. But I did have a hard time 5 years ago when a friend of mine wanted to rent from me, or friends of mine want to rent from me, charging more than what they could get in the neighborhood. Now, I have no problem. Why? We're 100% full. In fact, we're 150% full, and we provide a lot more above and beyond in order to get that extra premium.
Right.
And that's the confidence I've gotten in sales on that aspect. And I'm not doing the sales, but in terms of the way I approach the business, saying, guys, if they just want the cheapest solution for the 1991 Suburban to drive them around with one house, with one person at the house versus R3 and a 2014 Suburban, more power to them.
Right.
Have fun. I don't care. I gladly lose that person. When we rehab apartments, oh, you want a $400 rent? That's not us. We're $800 in rent. Go down the street. I'm okay with that because you want what we don't have. You want no granite countertop, asbestos 9-inch tiles, etc. That's where I'm sitting there saying, from my standpoint, we have the financial ability to go make our products where we can sit there and say, how do we make our prices the highest? And if you listen to our podcast, you'll hear me talk about that a lot. We want to be the most expensive, not just because we raised our price, because the other factor is you got to justify that expense, right? And that's the thing where I think from the providing the service is similar to selling from your aspect. I hope, in the sense of, I don't want to just sell somebody. Oracle years ago had a problem when their salespeople would just basically lie to people and say, no, the software will be able to do what you need. You just sign this contract.
Exactly.
We'll get it in. And they were getting in trouble because it was like they signed the contract all of a sudden a year because they wanted to get the sales in for that year, that quarter. And all of a sudden the product delivered like it doesn't do what you said it was going to do. Right. It's like, oh, well, this happened. They still try to hold into the contract. It's like, well, wait a second. I signed this because you said it would do X, Y, and Z. It only does X and Y kind of thing. And I think that's more what you're talking about.
That's the forced manipulative approach. So our approach would be, look, there's still a question as to whether or not it's going to work or not. But the way that we approach what Oracle salespeople do is they just sell Oracle because they have a big brand and because it's the only option essentially for most organizations. So it's a product-based sale. Ours is a problem-based sale. We care more about what do you want? What's the impact of success and failure? What's missing? here's the solution. So we focus on the 3 steps of defining the problem and then come up with the best solution. You know what it looks like? Our solution isn't the best for you, or our solution is the best for you as long as you don't mind this being a risk, this being a risk, this being a risk. And you know why they don't mind, or they didn't mind when I was selling for startups that were just post R&D? Is because they trusted me.
But they trust you.
And they were willing to take the risk that I outlined.
So your job as the consultant, coach, everything is to have everybody have that same mentality. Because always the concern I have is when you have one good salesperson,
right,
you can't replicate that, and you can't build a business off one good salesperson. You got to build a business off of the way everybody thinks in the company, right? Do you follow what I'm saying?
No.
Warren Buffett is a great investor. But if he doesn't build that same investment philosophy with the people underneath him, when he dies, the company dies.
Right.
Right?
Scalability.
Right. Scalability. And that's the thing. If we have one good salesperson that doesn't have it's only a good salesperson because they make the most number of phone calls as opposed to they follow the process that we as a company have agreed on, if that person gets a better job offer, which they will. A good salesperson is never unemployed, right? It's just one of those things where, well, then what do you have? You have a hobby, right? Or you have something that's not even scalable. Forget about scalable. You can't even sell that business.
It's not valuable. Yeah, there's no value.
I always tell people, business people are very quick to brag. I'm the most important person in my company. What do I always say?
Well, Paul just stepped down as CEO because you want this company to live beyond you.
I don't want to be. The worst thing in the world is I'm the most important person in my company, right?
Right.
Because how do you sell that? How does that continue on beyond you?
You understand the definition of value. So your priority
I'm understanding it more.
is value.
I'm not there yet.
You understand? Today it's value. Maybe 10 years ago it was title, right? Many people have different ways. So your level of awareness.
It was never title, ironically. I never had a card that said CEO, but it was always about the money for me. I always tell people, I have a beautiful home here in Richfield. They're like, why'd you build in this neighborhood? Because I always say to people 2 things. They always say, why'd you build such a big home? I always jokingly say, to fit my big ego, of course. And 2, I always sit there and say, I wanted to build there. It's a girlfriend. My girlfriend and I have this conversation. Even on the plane this weekend, we were talking about house and how she's trying to convince me to build a new house that's smaller. And it's funny. I tell her, I'm like, it's funny. If you'd said it to me 10 years ago, I'd been like, get the F out of here. Because I wanted everybody to see, look how successful Paul is. Now I want land to just build on my own so that nobody sees me because I want to be alone. Not because I'm this not entitled, enlightened person. It's just that now it doesn't matter to me as much anymore.
Yeah,
but I still want to have a nice house. You know
I was
what I mean?
shocked your new house is going to be so far off the road, hidden
1,000 feet back
forest.
but it was still a large home though.
Yeah.
Because there's a difference between, does this define me versus is this what I want? I spent a lot of time at my house. I wanted to have everything I needed there versus I want everybody to see me. But mine was 1,000 feet off the road. You couldn't see it. It was winding back. And I loved that because I like the woods. You know what I mean? 10 years ago, 0 chance that happened.
Mm-hmm.
0. 15, 20 years ago, as a salesperson, you talk about ego. Give me an example. I want to hear like how bad the ego was. Mine was the house. Mine was literally, I'm on a corner lot and everybody in the neighborhood who drives to certain sees my house.
Okay. I can go deep.
Go deep. I'm excited.
Well, so I can't tell this story without getting emotional.
Okay.
So let's see if it works.
Are you feel comfortable telling the story?
Well, I think it's instructional. So why not?
Do you want to hold hands or you want to wait?
He likes the touch of another human.
I think this whole thing was set up just so he could hold my hand.
I think I put him here.
Now I know why you guys do podcasts.
He showed me your picture. I'm like, I gotta hold that guy's hand.
Well, you're lucky. You guys have separated enough. So Paul's sort of a long toucher.
That's what I hear. I go like this a lot.
It's just like he'll just hold it. He'll just sit here and hold it on people. So somehow I've spread you guys out enough.
I almost became a priest actually, but go ahead.
Go ahead, James.
No,
Go
it's
ahead.
Jimmy.
So think about ego, right? It's about self-importance, about separation. So ego. So essentially, every thought you have that's that's bad for you and bad for your health, your longevity, happiness really comes from the ego. So imagine running a sales team for a venture-backed startup, and you have the opportunity to make life-changing money. You've just raised $20 million. And, there are challenges with the technology. And you've got to make a market for this. And then imagine you're at your desk working your ass off to make it happen. Nobody's working harder than you. I love meeting type A folks who have the same thoughts that I've had in my life. Nobody works harder than me. Nobody can put the time in. Nobody can be more productive. It's those thoughts that go through your mind.
No comment.
Right? Mm-hmm. And then imagine looking up and seeing the room empty. Where are all your employees? And, the first thought isn't where are all your employees. The first thought is rage, right? And you go looking for them, and you find them in a room all huddled around a TV. And what?
9/11.
Yeah.
9/11.
That or OJ trial, but keep going.
Yeah. And so I get in there just in time to see the second plane hit the building. And I ignore that, and I chastise them for not being at their desk.
Wow.
Holy shit.
Good for you. Not good for you in doing that, but good for you in, being able to. When did you realize how bad that was? How soon after? Or how long after?
It was momentary. It didn't take long.
Really?
Just because, well, in this case, 2 of my friends were on that second plane.
No shit.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
Shit. And you didn't even know that at the time, obviously.
When I discovered that.
Oh, wow. No wonder you get emotional about that.
Ego. Yeah, so.
Oh my gosh.
Now, do you think it would have affected you as much if they hadn't been on the plane?
It might have taken me longer.
Yeah.
It probably wouldn't have, because, most of us, ego protects us.
I just got chills.
Yeah, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Hold on, sorry. You watched the second plane and then found out you had friends on it?
Yeah. Husband and wife.
Tim, we're kind of deep here at the moment. We're talking about 9/11. It went from sales to 9/11. That is completely insane.
Wow. So could that be the incident that kind of triggered it?
That
maybe?
wasn't even the incident that triggered it. That was 3 or 4 years before the
phone call.
My awakening.
No, but remember when I said sometimes things happen, you start going, "What am I doing?"
That was the boat with the flood.
Oh,
that was an early warning that I ignored.
Oh, jeez, man.
Yeah. So I mean, I believe my definition of truth, right? It comes with authenticity. It comes with vulnerability. It comes with transparency. So, you have to, in my business, in my life, you have to walk the talk, right? I try to elevate the people around me. So I'm not here telling the story for sympathy or for any other reason, to demonstrate vulnerability. And, there's a power there's a confidence that you gain when you're able to go deep with people you've just met. So that's the fun stuff. That's the exercise. The old me was somebody who would just button all that stuff up, and that's why it's not sustainable.
Getting back to business, I wanted to bring this up because
you're going from 9/11 to business now.
Well, I just
I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
kind of. I got.
I want to make Tim laugh.
I've been dying to think about this because one of your foundations of your keynote deliveries, which we record, and if you go on Instagram at Floriss Group LLC, you're going to see
Floriss
FLORISS Group LLC. You'll see Crossroads Media work on there here in the very near future. But one of the foundations is training companies to be recession proof. What were you finding 10 years ago? What were you doing with companies to get them through the last recession? I mentioned before earlier in the podcast that you bring up the ideas that obviously everyone thinks another one is coming, and you want to prepare companies for that. And I knew you guys would click on this idea because
eventually, recessions are like getting sick. I mean, yes, you haven't gotten sick in 10 years, but it's not weird. He hasn't gotten sick since the last recession. Let's get him sick right now. Somebody bring down some flu for us.
Paul's betting against. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to. Here's the bottom line. Recessions are very beneficial for us because of our investing style and business style. We do extremely well in recessions. We call it recession proof, but it's not like we think to ourselves, okay, if a recession happens, how do we make a lot of money? It just happens that our philosophy does best during recessions. Does that make sense? There is a distinction between the two. So it's funny when you said recession proof, my next question to you, Jimmy, was going to be, what does that mean?
Well, it's super simple. So the whole premise of what we teach people is this idea of agency, this idea of abundance, right? You have the customers you deserve, you have the business you deserve, you have the life, the career, the employees that you deserve. It forces you to create agency and decide to take a leadership approach to everything that you do. So if you want a business that's recession proof, you have to be able to take the lead of growth, not just sit and wait for it to happen. So it's the difference between having a retail store where you just wait for people to walk in versus you're doing everything you can to sell that product through multiple channels, but you're doing it proactively. You're not waiting for it to happen.
This is a major...
I hope you're not bullshitting anybody here, because this is like really good stuff.
This is a major turning point in our business this year, because as a creative, all the photographers, videographers, all that we have ever done is put up a website and wait for the phone to ring. So Paul has implemented a series of outbound actions that we're taking that have become incredibly frustrating, have increased the stress on my life. And
don't care.
And so keep going, James. I mean, what were you finding 10 years ago working with companies that implemented this?
Well, there's some great there's great data, right? Bain looked at the data, Harvard Business Review published it, and they found that, so what we're talking about is sales, but we're talking about businesses that had sales forces that were prepared, in our vernacular, to take the lead and take control of growth.
How do you define that?
Well, it's a sales force. There are sales forces of order takers.
Mm-hmm. That's not sales.
Any business can succeed when everyone's succeeding, right? But if you have a sales force that's prepared, the right leaders, people, systems, and culture to take the lead and take control of growth, meaning I'm not waiting for it to be handed to me. I can take it from the growing market, or I can take it from my competition. Then those companies that were prepared in advance of the recession actually grew and separated themselves from their competition during the recession as well as after. They actually had a compound annual growth rate 4 times that of their competition.
Because all of the competition goes under in recessions. That's why recessions are good. Because all the garbage that just did well because they were taking orders is gone now. That's exactly the thing.
Yeah, it clears the table. So we're working with a global auto manufacturer.
I hope it's Tesla now trying to...
Callahan Auto.
Callahan Auto.
And they're not... What's happening is that we don't have a recession, but they're under severe competitive threat. And now the business that their order takers create for them isn't enough. What do they have to do? They need an outbound, proactive sales force, which is going to totally transform their culture, transform how they hire people, how they compensate people. It's going to have a huge effect on that business. But the leaders of that business who are curious, who have that growth mindset, they're welcoming the change. The people who, everyone else in the company who's used to our big brand, our big name is going to save us, it always has, it always will, who see change they greet change with fear, don't. They want to stay the way they are. So they need someone. So the difference in what we do is, as coaches, we're not just responsible for shedding light on the situation. We have to move the leaders, people, and systems and culture toward transformation. We have to move you to change so that you can achieve the results that you want. So that has to happen in a very programmatic way. That's the secret sauce. That's what I love to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, listen, I don't say it to be cynical. I just mean it like you say, talk the talk versus everybody can say this, you know what I mean? And the question is, are they actually doing it? And you seem like a very genuine guy, but I look at it going like, it's always a joke. I tell people, I'm very big in Northeast Ohio. I love Northeast Ohio. I love living in Ohio, right? It drives me nuts when kids leave Northeast Ohio and when their parents, or they say like, well, there's more opportunity elsewhere. You know what I would say to them? Do you create your opportunity or does your city create your opportunity? It's no different, right? That's the way I look at it. I'm like, put me in Youngstown, Ohio. No offense, Tim was from Youngstown. It was a town who's lost half its population. I'm quite sure I'd do well there. I don't mean that to be cocky or arrogant. I'm like, I will go out there and find opportunity. But some people, I had a friend of mine move to Atlanta once. She was great. She's like, Paul, it's so different. And she came back to Ohio. She's like, I literally was unemployed for like a day. Like literally you put an application out there, you get hired like that. And she lived there during the recession. It was that. And I sat there and said, how do you get good people if it's that easy to get a job? Just like the unemployment right now is 3.6%. If you don't have a job right now, what are you? Unemployed. I mean, how do you not have a job right now?
Retired.
I mean, exactly. I mean, it's unbelievable to me. There are more job openings than job vacancies right now, right? Unemployed people. I think it's along the same mentality of order takers. And we always talk upstairs about, are we taking orders or are we creating that value to hopefully do it? It's hard to make the transition. Sometimes you get complacent because if things are going very well, you don't want to rock the boat like these people are fearful of, right? But the hard part is when you have a bunch of LeBron leaving the Cavs, made a big change for ownership and the salespeople. What do the salespeople do?
Well, you have, so part of being a successful coach is not giving into that need or that desire to judge people, right?
Yeah, I'm judging.
So what we wanted,
I'm 100% judging.
What we want to do is, what it's all about is instead of judging, it's understanding, right? So what we want to do is understand. And so what's really interesting is that when you look at a population, everyone is living their own story. They're on their own journey toward mastery, and they're at different stages in that journey.
Yep.
You are at an elevated,
not as high up as you though.
Without stroking your ego, a little elevated sense of awareness. You're seeking counsel or mentorship from him, right? Mm-hmm. So the idea is that we have to understand that everybody is at a different stage, and we also have to understand that in Youngstown, I came from Buffalo. I left Buffalo as soon as I could. Now, it wasn't because there was no opportunity there. It's because I didn't see it. I wasn't capable
back then
of seeing it 20, 30 years ago. I just saw the same mistakes over and over again, and I wasn't in a position I didn't have the agency.
But you didn't go to like New York or Chicago, or like, you went to
Boston.
Oh, you did go to Boston. That's right. Oh, Boston.
Love Boston.
Do you really? I call it the worst city in the world.
My whole family was born there, man.
Everybody?
My girls, my wife.
Wow.
Yeah.
And now you guys in Columbus.
It's home. Yeah, we're here, but we still consider Boston home. It's really interesting. We consider ourselves Bostonians living in
Where'd you live in
Columbus.
Boston?
We lived South Shore.
Wow.
And then we also lived North Shore and Salem. So we had, that moment that I had that view, that epiphany over the phone. I was looking out, my window at the ocean. I mean, it was where we wanted to be.
That's the whole 9/11 thing. The second plane from Boston.
Plane left from Boston.
Logan, yeah.
Yeah, we couldn't say that.
I wanted to close with this.
We're closing already? It's only been an hour and a half. Officially our longest podcast
of all time.
That's awesome.
That's a compliment.
Like
to
two
you.
things. I really wrote down this idea. I go back to when I'm not doing medias, I have sit-down conversations with people that I've photographed. And Paul and I have been discussing a master class for me to sort of teach what I have learned over the past decade to other photographers because I want to see people succeed. But the idea of reducing the feeling of sales by having a shared goal with your clients just speaks to me because
You've always been big on that one.
I will be quoting you for a very long time because I wrote it down 3 times here about having a shared goal with clients and removing that pitchy sort of salesy feeling of manipulation. It really stinks. But anyway, let me close with this. But
you're very genuine, Seth. I've always told them, Jimmy, when we tried doing these things, I had to have it in this platform. The reason we started podcasts, not because everybody in the world started podcasts. The reason we did it was it worked for me to be the most genuine I could be. Seth can be very authentic and genuine just speaking to a camera, which is a very, very powerful trait, I feel. And it's not fake at all. Like I look at Seth going, man, he really believes this. You know what I mean? That's what I like about Seth so much is like the fact that he still wants to, but he always talks to me about when he talks to the bride, he talks to the mothers. what do you always talk about is like, what's this going to do for like,
Yeah,
this
the
is the most
impact of these photos. All too often, people feel like you're hiring me as a hired vendor to take these pictures that will never do anything. It's like, yeah, like you said, what is the impact? And for us, we try to educate them that the shared goal is printing these photos, having photos of your loved ones
on the mantle so you can look
on
at
the
them.
mantle. Last night, I installed a piece of wall art that's damn near as big as a whole wall in a beautiful family's room. And she texted my wife and said, this is the coolest thing I own, is just a picture of their family. You know what I mean? It's just like, anyway, I digress. So speaking about family, I'd love to end with like, how has being a dad to two wonderful gals, how has that transformed your life? What has that meant to you?
Well, anytime anybody asks me how I'm doing, it's somebody made me aware of the fact that I always start with my kids and then my bride and so on. And then business is second. So it's interesting how that affects me. But before I do that, I do want to let you know that the reason I responded to your outreach was because it was so genuine. Because as a CEO of a company, you're bombarded. And it was and if I could capture that authenticity and honesty and replicate, I would. I mean, I'm searching for a way to do that. And I think it happens because it was so authentic. So I commend you on that. I think for me, there's this belief that you can't teach people, you can't change people. Mm-hmm. And at a certain level, I can't change. So I'm still somebody. The reason I was the kind of salesperson that I was because I had this need to be liked. I needed recognition, and that's a path. And I sought to have that need met through my work. And we train salespeople on this all the time. We want to understand what kinds of limiting belief systems you were raised to have. You mentioned money is bad. Can't talk about money. Mm-hmm. So you can have these kinds of core DNA components of us, limiting beliefs. If they were raised into us, they stay.
Of course.
And doesn't matter how good of a coach I am. My belief system is that they stay. They never leave us. But what we can do is decide whether or not we get them met at work or in certain instances in our lives. So instead of needing to be liked now, I have a need to be respected. So the power that I bring to the table when we have a conversation isn't that I'm going to do whatever you ask me to do so that you like me. I'm going to push back and differentiate myself so that I can earn your respect. And I've given up that. I don't have that requirement now to be liked, and I don't have to get that met in a business environment. I don't have to get that met really anywhere. But it still exists in me. So what's interesting is that because of the way I was raised, there was nothing more important to me than my family. And when my wife and I, we've been married 27 years. Our oldest is 18. It took us a long time to have kids. We went through 11 IVF procedures.
Wow.
We ended up with 2 daughters. So miracles, nothing more precious for us than our kids. Mm. And when
do you ever remind them when they're being bad? Like, listen, that took 5.5 tries. You better stick in the gear here.
It's weird. My kids are never bad. Man. It's the craziest thing.
That's awesome.
But so I think the thing that the trigger for me was when I learned that we were having daughters, or a daughter and then the next daughter. Mm-hmm. Friends that have sons, and folks say the cliche lines, right? The stat that was true for me was that women tend to seek men in life that were framed by the relationship they had with their dad, right? So I knew that I was responsible for the women that I was raising, and I wanted to raise girls that were leaders. Mm. And that comes from a deep, deep focus on the good side of the Greek culture being really so focused on family and that functional dynamic that I want to have with my kids. And I saw, taking 9 or 10 years to have kids, you could see what was happening to my peers and their kids. So I didn't want to fall into those traps, those selfish or lazy traps as a parent. that I deemed as selfish or lazy. So I worked really hard to raise women who were leaders.
How do you do that?
Well, you know what it comes down to. The thing that triggered it for me was this idea of wait till they're so beautiful, James. Wait till they're dating. How many guns are you going to have at home, right? How are you going to intimidate their boyfriends? And I thought to myself, you know what? What about when I'm not there? How will they behave? Just like what you're concerned about when your employees. What about when you're not there? How do they behave?
Character.
You've got to instill that sense of leadership and character. And so how do you do that? It's what we talked about earlier. It's about this idea of commitment and accountability, but not holding them accountable to the point where you're making them feel like crap if they make a mistake. It's approach it with kindness, but still hold them accountable. Not because I'm smarter than you and I'm going to make you pay for every friggin' mistake you make. No, I'm just going to let you know that, hey, you did say this. We're not there yet.
Can you give an example, like specifically with your daughters? Because we think about this a lot. My brother just had a girl, and I love that my sister-in-law
I knew you were going to bring her up because Paul's going to need help with this here coming the next year.
My sister-in-law, I love her because she's so down to earth and so great. And she once said a story that she was so jealous of a girl that she went to high school with. They were all going to go to a party, and the girl said, I'm not going to that party. They're like, why not? It's like, I've taken a long time to earn my mom's trust. I'm not going to lose it because I go to a party and get in trouble. And Meg now realizes that as an adult. Like, imagine being in high school and you're trying to teach leadership to your kids. There's a lot of pressure out there. You know what I mean? And it's like, how do you instill the leadership to them? In high school, I was the follower because I was too scared. I always thought to myself, I'm the nerd. I need to go do what they do. Now, when I don't drink. People say, why don't you drink? I'm like, because I don't want to. I never drank in high school or college, but I remember being ridiculed for that. So with your daughters, like, how do you, give me an example of a time, like, you know, my dad was a very iron fist kind of father. And now I look back at it and I'm like, you know, I kind of liked it, but at the same token, I don't want to raise my niece that way. I want it to kind of be like, listen, you made this mistake. What's important is we learn from this mistake. But is that to being their buddy? Like, I don't want to be their buddy, but I want them to know that my brother and I always had a saying. My brother's 8 years younger than me, and we were very close. I used to always say to him, you know who Scott Peterson is? The guy who murdered his wife in California. I used to joke and say, I don't care if you pull Scott Peterson, you need to be able to come talk to me about it and we'll figure out a solution to it. Whether we ditch the body or something, no, I'm just kidding. Whatever it is, like the issue has happened. I want you to feel so comfortable that you can come to me and say, Paul, I fucked up and I need help. Not, oh shit, Paul's going to find out he's going to kill me. You know what I mean? Knowing that you're going to get, the first solution is, how do we fix the problem? The second solution is, okay, what did we learn from this problem and how do we fix that in the future? But then how do you balance, like, have you ever yelled at your kids? I know that sounds like a crazy question, but Kirk Reed is coming from Boston this weekend to our reunion. He told me once, my dad has never yelled at me, and he has immense respect for his father because my dad's never once yelled at me. And Kirk's done some stuff for, his mom was a disciplinarian, but Kirk's dad's been like, can't do that. He's never yelled at his son, but Kirk's respect for his father has always been since high school utmost.
That's great. So I can get to the point where I go blind with my temper.
Wow.
Right. It takes a lot to get me there, but I got that from my family as well. The first sons in my family. But you know, what's interesting is, the way I teach leadership at my house, it's maybe happened a handful of times, but I always apologize, recognize the mistake I made, and ask them for their forgiveness and move on. Right. So none of the folks in my family would ever apologize for that.
Yeah.
They'd make you feel like you brought it on. It was your fault I got so pissed off.
Of course.
Why'd you make me do that?
Yeah.
But it's accountability. So if you want people to be accountable, demonstrate it.
Yeah, of course.
And this whole idea that as a leader, you teach the people around you what your expectations are of them by your actions. So I always walk the talk. I always behave the way I expect my kid to behave. That's one that connects to the story you told. The first story I thought of when you asked, how do you teach leadership? Both of my girls dealt with bullies at young ages.
How young?
5th grade, 4th grade.
Yeah, typical.
On the bus. Because they were small. There's a big kid that's going to pick on them. So it was a great chance for a lesson. So the question that I posed to my daughter was, what do you think motivates a bully? And so I know that we're late here in our session.
No, we're not. Go. Keep going.
What motivates a bully? It's a great chance for that victim, that child who was picked on, to think about the bully from their perspective, right? So you're teaching, the first thing with that question is you're teaching understanding. I know how I feel. How does that person feel? What motivates that person? And the answer came to insecurity, right? We know that what we know is that bullies, they feel insecure. And what makes them feel powerful and secure is to make someone else feel the way they feel.
I've been explaining this to Gio, my 9-year-old, is that bullies, we're on the same level, and the only way to get above someone instead of working hard is just putting this person down, and then you get the feeling that you're above them. So I'm dealing with the same things, but keep going.
So what did your daughter say when you asked that question? What do you think the bully is thinking? Like, this is a 5th grader, it's a 10-year-old. What's the answer? What are they saying as a 10-year-old?
Well, we get there together with this idea of insecurity. And then I simply would ask them, have you ever felt insecure? And so we just explore that human fact that we all feel that way. And so now we know that the answer to insecurity isn't to make someone else feel like crap, right? It's to take ownership of it and figure out what's causing that. So what's interesting is you teach them about insecurity. And so what causes them, most young people, insecurity is that they feel like they don't measure up to the people around them. Mm-hmm. What happens is they give in to a definition of success or self-definition that is defined by other people, that's created by other people. Mm. So what can that bully do to feel less insecure? They can know who they are. They can be confident in who they are. They can love themselves. They can spend time thinking about what they want in life and going and getting it. They can take agency over the decisions they make and the actions they take. They don't have to have a victim mentality or a scarcity mentality, all these things. And so the question is, okay, how would a leader behave? Becomes a mantra or a question inside the home, right? And so we all now live up to that question, how would a leader behave? And so, great example, the first time your daughter, right, starts talking about boys, and you know they're going to go to a friend's house where there's going to be some girls and some boys, mm-hmm. and you know that friend has a 63-inch TV in their basement.
Yeah.
And you know that the only people who are going to be in the basement is a group of teenagers with raging hormones. And so the question is, so I can't be there. I can't be there with my shotgun intimidating people. I can't shake the guy's hand and squeeze it really hard and give him a look. You know, all that bullshit you see on TV.
Yeah.
All the egocentric stuff that we wish we could exert. You can't exert force in this case. You have to earn that mantle of leadership. And so what do you say to your daughter?
What did you say to your daughter?
And she will. And my daughter is.
I need to teach my kids, the boys, how to come up with those the counter solutions of those ones, right, Hank? Right, Seth?
Yeah, my son's Hank. My son's name is Hank. So
no,
yeah.
What'd you say to your daughter when you knew that was going to happen?
Well, so the question is, who's responsible for what happens in the basement?
You asked that question,
right? That's the first question.
And what did they say?
And she says, "Well, of course, me."
Good.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we taught our kids early on, and they had to understand it. We taught them early on that in a relationship, the woman has control. There's nothing the man will do that you don't let him do. Mm-hmm. Period. Now we can get rid of the extreme situation.
Of course.
Sure.
So what are you going to let him do? Now that's a quick question, Dad. I don't know. I know what I want to have him do, but I said, look, you've got to make the decision ahead of time mm-hmm. of what you are and you are not going to accept from this young man. That's it.
So you had an open conversation knowing full well that there could be something going on, but she's going to draw the line.
Right. I mean, that's the other thing about being a parent, right? If you, as a as a father, you can think that by telling her you're going to be celibate till you're 21 or whatever, that's just bullshit, right? So you have to accept reality. So part of this is about acceptance. But what you can do is you can give them the tools to make the decisions, right? So that's the conversation you have to have. That's what we had. You have to decide ahead of time of what is and what is not acceptable, so that when you're in the moment, it's not a surprise. You've thought about it already, and you can draw the line, and maybe even create an agreement with him that I'm not ready for this, or I am ready for that. And my eldest daughter, who I had this conversation with, and my youngest, who was listening to the conversation, this was a very profound conversation between a father and daughter. She wrote about it and talked about it often, and it's also a very meaningful conversation that's lasted with her for a long, long time. So the way you create leaders is that you put them in a position to make these decisions on their own, not to depend upon you, right? Because if you as the father are forceful,
well, that's not leadership, right?
Yeah, you're teaching them to obey. You're not earning it. You're forcing them to obey, and you're actually pushing them away. So you're actually creating more momentum for them to do exactly the opposite of what you want them to do, which is okay as long as it's not so much that they get in trouble.
But you had to at some point. So my girlfriend has a 21-year-old son, and he and I were very close. Have been close for a long time, and he looks at me like as an older brother. Well, either way,
right.
I was always like very big on talking to him about things, but you better believe there were some times I just like snapped at him, like, I'm sure you've had that where you just like snapped at your daughter saying, listen, this is the way it's going to be because of whatever reason, or no?
There's no, my personality is, I have
those
tendencies. I certainly do, but the anger and the forcefulness, first off, it's never acceptable. So whenever it happens, it's always something that I recognize and that I apologize for, because I never want someone to feel like that.
Even your
normal.
daughters.
Yeah.
Of course.
It's never acceptable to get emotional, but it's something that I know about myself that I'm not going to beat myself up over. But we also early on taught our kids things like, it's good to make mistakes. You just have to make mistakes you can walk away from.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So that was our mantra first. So, you go into the basement with all these kids, you're going to make a mistake, but are you going to make a mistake you can walk away from? So these things always pop up, these truths, and you look for situations for these pearls of wisdom to come up. You don't try to force it, but you have them.
That's a good line.
In a situation that makes sense.
Well, it's funny because I use the same line for investing in business. Like, take a risk, but is it a risk that's going to bury you? If the answer is yes, then maybe you should, not do that. You know what I mean? And it also depends on your current situation. So it's funny. All these, I was just thinking to myself earlier, I'm like, this guy could be a value investor pretty easily. Just from the standpoint
disciplined.
Just from the standpoint of how he views it, like making a mistake that you can walk away from. That's a very big tenet in value investing. Like, make sure that you analyze this enough where even if you're wrong, it's not a bad wrong. You know what I mean?
Right.
And by the way, I wouldn't get into pedantics of, you can walk away from anything, really. Just awkward.
Thank you, Paul. Great close. You can find James and his awesome teachings.
This is incredible. This was a, Mike from last time. This one, Jimmy. Yeah. It's been great.
FlorissGroup.com, FLORISS, FlorissGroup.com, and you'll see our media on his Instagram at Floriss Group LLC. James, my mind is melted listening to you. I thought we'd be getting into more of like business numbers, but this is more of like a personal character building type.
Do it next time.
Exactly.
Yeah. Got to have you back on. Learn from us podcast. Paul, we're thinking about rebranding.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of learning from we do so much. This to me is more important than the business side because that will go into the business side. Yeah, like our last guest for the podcast, great guy, Mike. We helped them day one increase his revenue 25%. Day one. Just by telling them you have a great product, you have demand, you're great. Go spend this. Literally, he says he's 2 for 2 now and increasing his price by 25%. And I'm so happy for him because I'm like, this is a guy who was like you. We're like, this is a humble, great guy who's just like, I did this, and all of a sudden, it's kind of like, I don't think he saw his worth. You know what I mean? And we talked to him. I just said, listen, do me a favor, try this. If I'm right, you're going to DJ my 40th birthday for free. If I'm wrong, what do you lose? A client or two? Big deal. You can rebound. First day, right, Seth?
First day.
First day, second day. I texted him. I said, I heard you had a good day. He goes, I'm now 2 for 2. I was like, this is awesome. So,
Boom.
But at the same point, this mentality and this thought process is how he's going to get into higher revenue and generate more income and all that stuff. I tell everybody, I want to talk about numbers. I didn't ask you about the numbers. Frankly, it doesn't matter to me. This is more important.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks for joining us, James. I'm so glad you came all the way up here, and I can't wait for us to work together more.
Jimmy had fun.
Jimmy had fun.
Jimmy likes what he sees.
Jimmy wants to come back.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
See ya.
Bye.